The February 9th, 1982, 24 passengers died in Tokyo Bay. The plane touched water before it ever touched the runway. There was no engine failure. The weather was calm. This wasn't a mistake. This was a chain of decisions. In the final seconds, the captain disengaged the autopilot, pushed the nose down, and deployed reverse thrust in the air. People started dying before anyone even hit the ground. Then, seconds after impact with the water, the captain took off his uniform. He tore off his stripes. As he climbed into a rescue boat, he said, "I'm just a passenger." How does the most trusted person on the aircraft become the biggest threat on that aircraft? And if people saw this coming days before, why did no one pull him out of that seat? This wasn't just an accident. The investigation began. Japan's Ministry of Transport pulled the black boxes. The cockpit voice recorder was analyzed, second by second. Data was reviewed. And the picture said this: the airplane was healthy. The weather was fine. An ILS approach was in progress. So there was no classic story to hide behind. No, the weather turned on us. No, the engine blew. No, we just ran out of time. This crash was not mechanical. This crash was an unmanaged human factor. And was that human factor unknown? It was not. Captain Seiji Katagiri's file was not clean. Documented psychiatric symptoms, paranoid thinking, hallucinations, calling the police and saying, "My house is being bugged," ripping open parts of his own ceiling looking for hidden devices, his wife warning that his condition was getting worse. In November 1980, Japan Airlines pulled him from flight duty. The official label was psychosomatic disorder. That was a softened term of the era. In reality, it meant severe psychological collapse. So up to that point, it almost sounds like they did the right thing. But then, something happened. 9 months passed. By late 1981, JAL's medical division cleared him as fit to fly. Katagiri came back. Not just as a co-pilot. He came back in the left seat. Here's the second layer. The airline's own rules said this: to be restored to captain duty on the line, you had to meet a certain minimum flight hour requirement again. Katagiri had not met that threshold. They let him fly anyway. And that wasn't the only break. February 8th, 1982, one day before the crash. Same captain, same airplane type, almost the same crew. Shortly after takeoff, with no warning, Captain Katagiri tried to deploy reverse thrust. Reverse thrust is something you use on the ground after landing to slow down. If you use it in the air, you kill lift. You can tear the airplane out of the sky. The cockpit froze. First Officer Ishikawa reacted instantly and recovered the airplane. In a normal world, that moment would have ended it. You ground the captain. You take the controls away. You protect everyone else. But that incident was never treated like a final red line. No one said, "This man is not flying tomorrow." No one said, "This is not mentally safe." The next morning, February 9th, he was flying 174 people into Tokyo. From here on, this is not fate. This is exposure. The plane left Fukuoka, climbed to 29,000 feet, and began descent toward Haneda around 0822. Haneda Tower cleared them for an ILS approach to runway 33R, standard procedure. Landing gear down. Flaps set for landing. On paper, everything looked normal. The jet is at about 1,000 feet now. Airspeed around 135 knots. This phase is supposed to be a stabilized approach. Speed under control, sync rate under control, captain in command. And there's a script. At 500 feet above the bay, First Officer Ishikawa calls out, 500 feet. At that moment,
The captain is required to answer, "Stabilized. Continue." That call means the landing is safe, I am in control. Captain Seiji Katagiri says nothing. That silence is not routine. That silence is an alarm. Because now the person in command is not responding. At 200 feet, flight engineer Yoshimi Ozaki calls again. 200 feet, decision height.
Decision height means you land now or you go around. There is no middle ground. Still nothing from the captain. In training, there's one word for this: incapacitation, meaning the captain may no longer be mentally present. At that point, the crew is actually allowed to do one thing: take the airplane away from him. But this is 1982. Cockpit culture is hierarchy. Taking control from the captain is not just a safety call, it can follow you for the rest of your career. The obedience instinct is still stronger than the survival instinct. The DC-8 is now only 164 feet above Tokyo Bay. That's about 50 meters. The runway is seconds ahead. And then everything breaks. Katagiri disconnects the autopilot, he slams the control column forward, he pulls the throttles back to idle, and then he does the one thing you are absolutely never supposed to do in the air. He deploys reverse thrust on the inboard engines. Reverse thrust in flight is like trying to slam the brakes on a flying building. Lift dies, the nose drops, the aircraft is forced down. Ishikawa shouts, "What are you doing, Captain?" At this point, it's not a checklist. It's not standard calls. It's a fight. Ishikawa is physically pulling back on the yoke, trying to raise the nose. Ozaki is out of his seat, grabbing for the captain's arms. They are trying to stop their own captain from crashing their own airplane. But by then, there's no altitude left. 510 meters before runway 33R, the DC-8 slams into the shallow water of Tokyo Bay. The hit doesn't just stop the airplane, it tears it apart. On impact, the nose section and cockpit break away from the fuselage. The cockpit floods, the main fuselage keeps moving forward and actually rides up over its own separated nose. That sliding crushes the passengers in the forward rows. The first 11 rows take the hit. 24 passengers die in seconds. And then something almost impossible happens. The airplane doesn't explode. There's no major post-impact fire. The fuselage, even torn open, doesn't fully disintegrate. Out of 174 people, 150 are still alive. Rescue boats from Haneda, Coast Guard, fire, emergency, reach the wreck within minutes. The water is freezing. People are clinging to the wings, others are crawling out through torn metal. And in the middle of that chaos, rescuers notice one detail. One of the first people onto a rescue boat is the captain. But he doesn't look like the captain anymore. He's taken off his uniform, he's ripped off his rank stripes, he's wearing a civilian sweater. He tells rescuers, "I'm an office worker. I was just a passenger." In Japanese aviation culture, the expectation is simple. The captain is the last to leave. Here, 24 passengers will never come back, and the captain is already off the aircraft, denying he was even flying it. Inside Japan Airlines, people called it unbelievable. Because at that point, the question changed. It wasn't just what happened in the cockpit. It became, how was this man still in the cockpit at all? That question went straight to the airline, because by then it was on record. Documented psychiatric symptoms, paranoid delusions, hallucinations, and attempted reverse thrust deployment in flight the day before. And still he was allowed to fly 174 people into Tokyo. There's a sentence people like to use after disasters. No one could have known. Here, they knew. And the people who paid for that were sitting in the first 11 rows.